Do you know people who had lobotomies and survived? How did they change? My grandmother had a brain aneurysm and we didn't find out until decades later when my mom got power of attorney and gained access to her medical history that the surgeon had actually removed a large portion of her frontal lobe. She lost her sense of judgment and mental filter. I think my mom didn't notice it as much because she'd always seen my grandmother's narcissistic side. But as her granddaughter, I noticed a huge change. She acted a bit drunk and said every rude thing that came through her mind. She was hard to be around for everyone except my grandfather. Towards the end of her life, as she started to develop dementia, and she actually became very sweet and patient. That's the opposite of what normally happens with dementia. People become very irritable and agitated. Howard Dully was lobotomized when he was 12. Later in life he wrote a book about it. I remember searching about JFK as a kid and finding out he had a sister, Rosemary Kennedy, who was lobotomized in her early 20s, secretly arranged by their father. And she actually survived but was left with the mental capacity of a baby until she passed around her 80s. She was mentally handicapped at birth because nurses forcibly kept her inside her mother due to the doctor running late. I think that many victims of lobotomies were forced into it. Nobody is interested in having someone messing with their brain. But the doctors who performed them were very well aware of how horrible lobotomies were and still kept doing them. The last lobotomy performed was in 1967 and resulted in the patient's death. So no, I don't know any lobotomy people. I went to university for 2 years with a guy I'll call Mac who had a lobotomy. Mac was attacked by a guy with an axe. Mac says he deserved it but won't elaborate. Scar from ear to ear over the top of his head, along with some very low inhibitions. He has memory problems but passed his HND. As long as he repeats info over and over, it sinks in eventually. He did have a scribe when it came to written exams and extensions for assignments. We live in a tiny town, so his story has been verified by multiple people. Multiple times. In the 40s and 50s, many women were victims of it. Many of them did not have a choice at it. I can't remember the statistics, but it must have been nearly 60% of lobotomies were on women. Freaky coincidence, I'm literally watching the lobotomy episodes of Ratched right now. My great-aunt had a lobotomy back when they were in fashion. Apparently, as she grew from her late teenage years and into young adulthood, my great-aunt would fall into really violent fits of rage and would often attack and abuse people. She attacked my great-grandmother one time and ripped a chunk of her hair out, and in another incident choked another relative unconscious. She began to develop a reputation around town for being unpredictable and violent. Things got serious when, in a fit of rage, she violently kicked one of their maids down a large flight of stairs. The police and courts became involved after that incident, and the judge said my great-aunt was either going to go to prison, or her family would have to send her to a mental asylum. Her family found the most exclusive and expensive mental asylum in the state and was prepared to send her there. Well, on their first visit to the asylum, my great-grandmother took one look at the place and said that she would never allow her daughter to live there because of the appalling conditions she saw there. I'm not sure of the details after this, but somehow they found out about lobotomies, and my great-aunt underwent such a procedure not long after this incident, so she would neither have to go to prison or be committed to a mental asylum. I only have very vague memories of my great-aunt. By the time I was around, she was very old and frail, and I didn't notice any difference from any of my other elderly relatives. As a kid, I picked up from overheard adult conversations that there was something different about her. But I never understood or saw what that was. The thing was that after her lobotomy, my great-aunt's rage fits totally disappeared. I always remembered her a quiet and meek old woman. She lived with my great-grandparents and then other relatives for the remainder of her adult life. So never independently, but she also worked as a bookkeeper for her family's businesses and maintained a normal and active social life. One of the few memories I have of her is her beautifully playing the piano during Christmas one year. When I was going through major depression, I remember thinking I would have loved to have been lobotomized. The idea of never being able to feel joy or sadness again seemed like a better alternative to constant suffering. John F. Kennedy had a sister who had a lobotomy. She was not happy. Is anyone reading this even old enough to have known someone before they had a lobotomy? I don't think they've been done outside of extreme circumstances since like the 50s. It was largely gotten rid of in the 1950s when the Soviet Union outlawed it and claimed everyone in capitalist society had been lobotomized. I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy. Tom Waits. Not personally, but the Kennedys apparently had the procedure done on one of their daughters. And from what I hear, they did not take to it well. As far as whether people believed it was actually beneficial? Yeah, sure, why not? It was a new science. So as far as they knew, they were doing good. Apparently the guy who popularized them though was a complete quack in hindsight. Mainly consisted of jamming an ice pick up your nose and wiggling it around a bit to scramble your frontal lobe. Yeah, no. For science. There is a historical fiction titled The Lobotomist's Wife. It's quite informative and disturbing. Well written and easy to read.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. TooAfraidToAsk is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.